Think about this for a second. You can stream any movie instantly. You can call
Grandma.
anyone
So
on
good
the
to see
planet
You too, dear. How
for
are you?
free.
I'm great. The view is amazing.
You can get answers to any question in seconds. But if you order a package, you need to wait. Sometimes days, sometimes even longer. We built a superhighway for information. But for physical stuff, we're still using roads. The same system we used 100 years ago. Asphalt, rubber, traffic jams, pollution. It's slow, it's expensive, it's dirty. For more than a decade, we've been told a fix is coming. Back in 2013, Jeff Bezos stood on a stage.
Killing it. All the video you saw is completely real. The vehicle is completely autonomous. It lands by itself, it navigates by itself. It can fly more than 50 miles an hour. It has a 20-mile range round trip and can deliver packages 5 pounds or less. It's going to work really well in one of the hardest neighborhoods, urban, kind of suburban, dense suburban neighborhoods. You just need a landing field.
He showed the world a vision. Drones are everywhere, bringing us pizza, bringing us phones. A delivery utopia in the sky. That was over 12 years ago. So, where is it? Why are our skies still empty? Why are delivery vans still stuck in traffic? I'm Stickman Xing. I was curious about this too, so I looked into it. What I found surprised me, because while we looked up at empty western skies, something else happened. In China, the revolution was already underway. But it wasn't about building a cooler drone. It was about building something invisible. A hidden highway in the sky, powered by AI, run by robots. It's already making 15-minute deliveries happen. Right now, in cities across China. In this video, we'll look at the drone network you never see. The one China built while the West was still writing rules. Here are 5 questions we'll answer today. Watch closely. All the answers are hidden in the story. Question 1. Which Chinese company has completed over 740,000 drone deliveries? Question 2. How fast can a Chinese drone hub process an order? Question 3. What's the name of Meituan's latest delivery drone? Question 4. How many drone routes does Meituan operate in China? Question 5. What precision does Meituan's robotic arm achieve? This is just for fun, no prizes. Just the satisfaction of knowing more than your friends. Stick around to the end. We'll test your memory.
Welcome to Stickman's China Quiz. I'm Xing, born in China, raised in Hong Kong, and the person behind the channel. By now, you probably already know Stickman Xing, our little visual guide who helps to bring each topic to life. Here's how it works. We research deeply, animate with AI, and end every episode with a quiz that puts you in the driver's seat. If you're tired of shallow headlines and want to truly understand China, you've come to the right place. No politics, no noise, just facts, stories, and curiosity. Join us as we discover the real China together.
Before we talk about China's solution, we need to understand the problem. It has a name. It's called the last mile. Sounds simple, right? The last mile is just the final step. From a warehouse to your front door. But here's the crazy part. That final short trip, it's the most expensive part. A package can cross an entire ocean on a container ship. That costs a few dollars. But that last trip through your city, that can cost 10 times more. According to logistics industry data, the last mile accounts for over 50% of all shipping costs. More than half. Think about that. Why? Because our cities weren't designed for this. Every day, millions of delivery vans clog our streets. They sit in traffic, they burn fuel, they pollute, they waste hours. In a crowded city, a 5-mile trip can take an hour. And in remote areas, the problem is even worse. In many places, roads don't exist, or they're impassable during rainy seasons. For these communities, getting medicine, getting supplies, it can be impossible. This is exactly what drones were supposed to fix. Drones don't get stuck in traffic. They fly over it. Over rivers, over mountains, a straight line from A to B. The vision was beautiful. Faster deliveries, cleaner deliveries, reaching places trucks can't reach, zero emissions. So why didn't it happen in the West? Why are we still waiting? The answer surprised me. The hard part wasn't the drone, it was the network. And while the West debated, China started building. The biggest barrier to drone delivery isn't technology. It's regulation. Specifically, one thing: BV loss. Beyond visual line of sight. Let me explain. For years, aviation authorities had one main rule. Drones had to stay within the pilot's visual line of sight. The pilot had to see the drone at all times. To fly beyond visual line of sight, companies needed special permission. One flight at a time, slow, expensive. This held everything back. In the United States, the FAA took a cautious approach. In August 2025, they finally proposed a new rule. It's called Part 108. It standardizes BV loss operations. The final rule is expected in 2026. That's more than a decade after Amazon's promise. Europe is on a similar path. Their framework is called U-Space. It took effect in January 2023. But implementation? Uneven across different countries. Some moving faster, some slower. Now here's where it gets interesting. China took a completely different approach. The Civil Aviation Administration of China, the CAAC, didn't wait. They actively encouraged large-scale urban trials. They gave companies the green light to test, to fail, to learn, to scale. State-backed support meant Chinese companies could move fast. Really fast. This is the China contrast. While the West was still writing rules, China was already flying. This is where it gets really exciting. China didn't just change the rules, they changed the game. If you're fascinated by how China builds the future, hit that subscribe button. We explore Chinese technology, innovation, and culture every week. New videos drop regularly. Subscribe now so you don't miss what's coming next.
单后呢，无人机会自动回返到运营基地。
Now, let me introduce you to the company leading this revolution. You might know Meituan. It's one of China's biggest apps. Like Uber Eats, DoorDash, and Groupon all rolled into one. They have over 700 million users. More than 6 million merchants. They deliver food, groceries, medicine, you name it. But what you probably don't know is their drone division. According to December 2025 reports, Meituan has completed over 740,000 commercial drone deliveries. Let me say that again, 740,000. They operate across 65 different routes in major cities like Shenzhen, Shanghai, and Beijing. They've even expanded to Hong Kong and Dubai. This isn't a pilot program. This isn't a test. This is an industrial-scale operation. I was curious about this, so I looked into the data. I visited Shenzhen last year. I saw it with my own eyes.
This place is amazing.
Drones taking off from rooftops, landing in residential communities, delivering hot meals in minutes. And the technology behind it? Let me show you what I found. Let's start with the drone itself. Meituan's latest model is called the M4L. It carries up to 4.5 kilograms. That's about 10 pounds. That covers most food and grocery orders. It flies up to 20 kilometers on a single charge. That's about 12 miles. And it's built for real-world conditions. Rain, wind, complex urban environments with buildings and power lines. It handles all of it. But the drone is just one piece of the puzzle. Meet the M, Port 3. This is Meituan's automated airport. It's compact, designed to sit on rooftops or in community centers. Here's what happens inside. An order comes in, a robotic arm finds the items. It packs them into a special container. It loads them into the drone, installs a fresh battery, uploads the flight plan. The whole process, from order to launch, as little as 60 seconds. 60 seconds. And the precision? The robotic arm operates at plus or minus 1 millimeter. That's insane. That's the width of a credit card. This is Chinese engineering at its finest. Built for speed, built for scale, built to work. But here's the thing, the drone is just the delivery truck. The real magic is invisible. It's the ground network and the AI brain that runs everything. Meituan calls these nests. They're launch sites built directly into stores, restaurants, and residential areas. Each nest is a data node. It has its own weather station, cameras pointing at the sky, feeding real-time information into the network. They connect through multiple systems: 5G, fiber optics, satellite. The connection between drones, ground, and AI is never lost. Then there's the AI brain. It's called UTM. Unmanned Traffic Management. Air traffic control for drones. Fully automated. Here's how it works. Before a drone takes off, it submits a digital flight plan. The UTM system checks this path against all other traffic. Other drones, helicopters, temporary no-fly zones. Then it does something brilliant. It uses dynamic airspace reservation. Imagine booking a conference room, but for the sky. The drone reserves a specific volume of airspace, just for the few seconds it will be passing through, guaranteeing no other drone can be in that same spot at the same time. Every drone also has remote ID, a digital license plate, constantly broadcasting its location, altitude, and speed. And the AI learns from millions of flights. It predicts conflicts. It reroutes drones around sudden storms. It optimizes flight paths for energy efficiency. This is the invisible highway. Not concrete and steel, data and algorithms. Silently working in the background, delivering your food in 15 minutes. So what does this actually look like? Let me walk you through a real Meituan delivery in Shenzhen. It's lunchtime. You're at work. You open the Meituan app. You order noodles from your favorite restaurant. You hit confirm. Instantly, that order goes to the restaurant and to the nearest drone nest. The restaurant prepares your food, packs it in a special leak-proof container, hands it to a Meituan employee. That employee walks to the nest on the rooftop, scans the package, loads it into an M4L drone. The drone already has a fresh battery. Its computer connects to the UTM network, submits a flight plan from the restaurant roof to your office building. In seconds, the UTM system checks for conflicts, other drones, helicopters, weather. It gives the green light, reserves the airspace. Approved. The drone does a quick pre-flight check. Rotors spin up. It lifts off vertically. It climbs to cruising altitude, usually around 200 to 400 feet. Its remote ID starts broadcasting, digital license plate active. For the next few minutes, it flies itself. Sensors constantly scanning, looking for birds, buildings, other drones. A flock of pigeons appears. The collision avoidance system detects them instantly. It adjusts course, avoids the birds, returns to its path, all without human help. As it nears your office, you get a notification. Your delivery is arriving in 2 minutes. The drone slows, descends to a designated landing zone, a small pad marked just for drone deliveries. It hovers about 30 feet up. A winch gently lowers your noodles on a tether. The moment the package touches the ground, the tether detaches. The drone climbs, sends a delivery complete signal, then flies back to its nest. Battery swapped in seconds. Ready for the next order? Within minutes. The entire trip, from click to noodles in your hand, about 15 minutes. No delivery person, no traffic, no emissions. Just a seamless flow of goods across the invisible highway. And this is happening right now, thousands of times a day, in cities across China. This isn't just about food delivery, it's much bigger. The Chinese government has a name for this. They call it the low-altitude economy. According to the Civil Aviation Administration of China, the CAAC, the low-altitude economy reached 1.5 trillion RMB in 2025. That's about 200 billion US dollars. Nearly 20,000 drone operators are registered. Over 529,000 drones are flying in Chinese skies. For delivery, for inspection, for emergency response. Medical deliveries are happening too. Blood supplies to remote villages. Vaccines to communities cut off by mountains. Emergency medicine during natural disasters. Logistics companies are using drones to connect rural and urban China, places where roads are bad or don't exist at all. And the government actively supports this. They provide funding, they create testing zones. They write regulations that enable innovation, not block it. This is the China model. Build first, test fast, scale quickly. Learn, improve, repeat. While the West debated, China built. While the West wrote rules, China flew. The result? A head start that will take years to catch. This is what happens when a country decides to build the future instead of waiting for it. If you want to understand where the world is heading, join over 50,000 curious viewers. Subscribe now, we're just getting started. Now, let's test your memory. Remember those 5 questions from the beginning? Let's see how many you got right. Question 1. Which Chinese company has completed over 740,000 drone deliveries? A. JD.com, B. SF Express, C. Meituan, D. Alibaba. Think about it. The correct answer is C. Meituan. According to December 2025 reports, Meituan has completed more than 740,000 commercial drone deliveries. They operate across 65 routes in cities like Shenzhen, Shanghai, and Beijing. They've even expanded to Hong Kong and Dubai. Question 2. How fast can a Chinese drone hub process an order from click to launch? Option A, 10 minutes. Option B, 5 minutes. Option C, 60 seconds. Option D, 30 seconds. The answer is C, 60 seconds. Meituan's M-Port 3 automated airport uses a robotic arm to pick, pack, and load drones in about 60 seconds. Fresh battery installed, flight plan approved, launched. While you're still putting your phone down, the drone is already in the air. Question 3. What's the name of Meituan's latest delivery drone? Option A, M3. Option B, M4L. Option C, M5 Pro. Option D, M-Port. The answer is B, M4L. The M4L carries 4.5 kilograms. It flies 20 kilometers on a charge. Question 4. How many drone routes does Meituan operate in China? Option A, 15. Option B, 35. Option C, 65. Option D, 95.
配合 M-Port 3的8轴机器人操作，带来正负1毫米的精准抓取。历经数十万单的接驳。
The answer is C, 65. Meituan operates across 65 different routes in major Chinese cities. That's more than any Western company. And they're adding more every month.
每一次流转背后，通信链路。
Question 5. What precision does Meituan's robotic arm achieve?
让智能持续
A plus or minus 1 centimeter.
是让稳定成为本能，
B plus or minus 5 millimeters.
构筑起应对环境变化的双重防御。
C plus or minus 1 millimeter.
天气挑战，结合自
D plus or minus 0.1 millimeter.
不曾间断。这是一次天空与地面的全新联通，也是智慧城市的效率跨越。全新美团智能接驳机场 M-Port 3。
The answer is C, plus or minus 1 millimeter. That's the width of a credit card. This precision allows the M, port 3, to handle packages quickly and reliably. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
同的无缝衔接，配备整。
So here's what I learned. For over a decade, we looked in the wrong place. We waited for a shiny drone, a cool gadget. We thought that was the revolution. But the real revolution was quieter, invisible. It was infrastructure. And while the West waited, China built. Today, Meituan has completed over 740,000 deliveries across 65 routes in cities designed for drone integration from the start. The global drone delivery market is projected to reach $2.4 billion by 2031. But China is already there. What we're witnessing is the birth of a new layer of commerce, a third dimension for logistics, between gridlocked ground and high-altitude jets. Soon, that quiet hum in the sky won't be a distant airplane. It'll be your meal, your medicine, your last-minute grocery order, arriving in minutes. The 2013 promise wasn't wrong. It just forgot to mention the highway, the traffic signals, the nervous system. That nervous system is now built in China. I'm Stickman Xing, born in China. When I first heard about this, I didn't believe it either. So, I checked. I looked into the data. I visited Shenzhen. I saw it with my own eyes. Now I want to show you more. If you want to understand the real China, the one you don't see in Western media, hit subscribe. Every week we unlock another piece of this puzzle, together. See you in the next video.